will call to order this Downtown Development Authority meeting, July 8, 2020. Amanda, you want to remind anybody?
Yes. Yeah. So same as normal, our new normal anyway. Make sure to mute your mic if you're not speaking. Just it cuts back on some of the background noise. Public comment at the end. And there is a new feature to raise your hand. It's that little glove in the middle of your screen there. Go ahead and click that if you'd like some attention at some point without interrupting the discussion. You do need to also click it to lower your hand as well when you're done. And yeah, if we want to do a roll call just so that we can make sure everyone's mics are working and who all is here, and then we can get started. Luis, are you present? Mayor Bliss?
Yes.
KM?
Yes.
Jermel? Greg?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Diana?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
And Rick?
Yes.
Great.
Okay, good. So we do have a couple motion items today, and I believe we're good to just, I'll ask those that oppose. And hearing them, we'll accept the motion to pass. Okay. On to our first order of business. We need to approve the meeting minutes from June. Are there any questions or comments or corrections?
Rick's microphone or something is garbled on my end.
It is.
Yeah, I'm hearing the same thing.
What the heck?
Just make sure everyone's on mute.
I think it's the Wi-Fi or the internet connection.
Okay, yeah, it could be.
All right, sorry.
We'll try to translate for you, Rick.
I'll try to speak more clearly. I'll do my best. Are there any comments or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. This is KM. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
This is Diana. I'll support the motion.
Any further comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I did just want to point out real quickly, we did include attachments to the minutes showing the Economic Recovery Committee's work and the expenditures of that $200,000. The other one, just as a follow-up to the minutes, is that our downtown enhancement grant, which we were using to help with window replacements, we have had total requests from 13 businesses equaling a little over $71,000. None of those requests have exceeded the $15,000 mark as of yet. So we haven't needed board or committee action on that. We are anticipating a few more in the coming weeks, so that may change, but I just wanted to point those two items out.
Okay. So I'll take the vote. Is there anyone on the board that opposes the motion? Hearing the motion carries. Next week, the air partnership. Tim, you want to cover this?
Yeah, I'm gonna do I'll do a setup, and then I'm gonna invite Darren Riley to join. And I believe I saw Darren on our list of attendees, so he'll jump in and do a presentation and walk through kind of what this is about. Before getting to that, however, I wanted to point out this is not an action item today. We just wanted to bring it to you for discussion. However, we are hoping that based on the conversation, it will come back to you as an ask in the future. And real quick, as I described in the memo, our city in downtown, we have got a history of planning and prioritizing environmental quality as well as economic development. We've seen that most recently in GR Forward, but also in the 2002 master plan in Green Grand Rapids. And while the river, I think for a lot of us, and water quality are often a focal point in those discussions, air quality is obviously no less important. For anyone that's gotten the climate action alerts over the past couple of days, I think you can understand what that means. I also want to point out that our goals specific to tree canopy and energy efficient design are a reflection of how economic benefit as well as environmental quality go hand in hand. And lastly, I think one of the primary reasons this seemed like a timely and important opportunity is that we've seen with the onset of COVID-19 that those with pre-existing respiratory conditions, often in lower income neighborhoods, are those that are being impacted the most. And so I think that really caught our attention on why this was a good opportunity. So finding ways to look at how we could gather more localized data on this issue and then translate that to policy or even land use decisions seemed like it would be of significant value. But given it's a new item with implications potentially beyond downtown, I wanted to give you a chance to hear a bit more and to ask any questions before we made a funding ask. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Darren, and hopefully his mic is on and working. Darren, are you there?
Yes, Tim.
Excellent.
Yes.
All right, and Darren, Amanda can help you advance your slides, but I'll hand the floor over to you.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, first off, thank you, Tim, and the team and all you all here today, giving us the opportunity to present. Very inspired by the work that DGR has been doing and the commitment to making the lives of citizens here in the city better. My name is Darren Riley. I'm from Rapids Air Quality, and today we'll be introducing the Hive Network proposal, and love for you all, your feedback, as Tim mentioned. I think it's just really for discussion and get your understanding. Before we get started really into the presentation, I'll just share the video first to provide further context visually. I think that might be helpful for kind of describing why we exist and what we're interested in terms of deploying air quality sensors in Grand Rapids. So if you don't mind, then you can click play. Yep, perfect. Great. I appreciate it. And Amanda, if you mind, advance to the next slide. Hopefully that was helpful, just giving context, kind of why we exist and why we're here. Again, my name is Darren Riley. I'm the executive director here at Rapids Air Quality. And air quality is something I'm extremely passionate about and, excited to really dive in. But to give quickly a background of, how we came about, I actually was brought onto this venture by Jim Meeks, who's the founder of Rapids Venture, also a Heritage Hill resident, named to the city of Grand Rapids. But he came to me early this year, presented me with the project and a business case of air quality, which I immediately jumped on board as it hits two major points for me. One, given my background, graduate from Carnegie Mellon, I've developed IoT technologies and other technologies, and really about human-centric product development and how we can improve the lives of others through technology. And secondly, it really hits home for me, deeply impacting not only my upbringing, my childhood, but also my loved ones. And so I'm really excited to kind of dive in and share that with you all. We can move on to the next slide to give even further background. About a year or so ago, the project came out of Seamless IoT in partnership with the Weggy Foundation to really understand capturing local air quality monitoring to capture our air data and compare it to the Eagle Station that's positioned downtown. And since then, Rapids Ventures has acquired the project, and we're now calling it Rapids Air Quality. which I'm now excited to lead and drive forward to hopefully bring more equity into the air that we breathe. We can advance to the next. Cool. So just give a quick history of air quality and where we came from and where we are today. So in 1970, EPA passed the Clean Air Act, really for counties across the U.S. To track some basic parameters around air quality, whether it's particulate matter, nitrogen oxide, or CO2, throughout each county. So we have one sensor here in Grand Rapids, and that's quite often the case in a lot of cities around the U.S. But what we found and come to know since then is that one air quality sensor is just not enough to get the true snapshot of a city and their state of air quality. There's studies that recently come out around even within one neighborhood, one block from each other, one block can have 8 times more polluted air than the other. So it just really goes to the point, as we alluded to in the video, that how does one sensor really capture the state of air quality, and especially in the neighborhoods that we intend to serve and support. We can move on to the next here. So why now? I think 2 reasons. One, technology has improved. Sensor costs have decreased. Communication protocols have improved. Sending and receiving data is so much faster now. And also data storage has decreased. The cost of data storage has decreased, which allows us to deploy a more distributed network of sensors and not stay to the old kind of antiquated system of having one sensor per county. Also on the health side, why now is that, we understand that COPD and asthma are long-term effects of chronic diseases due to air quality. And more so, as Tim alluded to, coronavirus. There's studies coming out almost monthly around the effects of air quality in combination with coronavirus. Recently, the Harvard Public Health, they came out with a study and a research that described that 1 gram per cubic centimeter increase of particulate matter actually results in 8% increase in mortality rates around COVID. So I think it's pretty obvious. COVID attacks the lungs. It's a virus that really harms people who have been breathing poor air all their whole life. And so I think it even brings more to light how essential it is to make sure that we have equity in the air that we breathe. And who does this affect? We've seen in the news recently people of color, communities of color, communities in socioeconomic deprivation, or other economically challenged communities. And also for myself personally, as I mentioned, it really hits home for me. My father was born in the projects of Queens, Baisley projects, housing projects, in the 70s, 80s, which was known to be a hotspot for poor air quality. Developed asthma as a child. Unfortunately, his life story ended to him being incarcerated when I was 5 years old. I think the worst part and why it really hits home for me and really made me the man that I am today was, upon him being released and re-entering citizenship when I was 15 years old, his asthma and damaged lungs prevented him to perform in the manual labor that he was restricted to due to his situation. So that's really instilled in me, and I think the values that we uphold here at Rapids Ventures, that it's imperative that we work to unravel some of these systemic issues. So no matter what color you're born in, or where you're born, that you have an equal go at it. So we can continue on to the next slide. And I really want to dive into the solutions that we're bringing today. So the Hive network, as we mentioned in the video, we will have distributed sensors throughout various cities in the U.S. We work with high grade and very efficient fast sensors that we deploy throughout a city. We also will be, our whole goal is to first put a baseline of the whole city, understand where we are today. We'll give a certain time period, let's call it a year. I think I believe in a proposal we've noted as a duration of a year of monitoring. At the end of that year, we'll have a report that we can understand where the hotspots are. We can discuss with community leaders and other stakeholders on how we can mitigate some of these issues, and begin to have targeted plans. And then now we can actually assess the benefits of those plans. So really using data to really drive our decisions to improve the air quality for our citizens. We can move on to the next slide. So first off, I want to give credit to DGRI and the city of Grand Rapids. I think it's great work that you all have done around electric vehicles, with the partnership with Main Mobility. I believe that the initiative to remove from diesel, get away from diesel fuel to more natural gas with the bus system. So there's great work here. I think it's really exciting that we can add sensor data and really get a strong snapshot to really reap the rewards and the benefits of all that work, to understand clearly what are the measures of those implementation, those plans. And I think it's also, as you see here, just a couple of results of, when you have the data, what can happen. You can inform development decisions. You can assess the pollution obviously around your city. You also, it's a good opportunity to engage citizens. Given today's climate, a lot of polarization and everything. I think that air quality is something that everyone can get behind. So it's a really opportunity to really activate civic engagement and show that we're working hard to make our citizens' lives better. So our ask here today is for DGR to sponsor five sensors. Our overall goal is to deploy dozens of sensors throughout the city of Grand Rapids and even the county. But starting here with the center of downtown Grand Rapids and working with Tim and Andy will really help us kind of motivate other community leaders within the city to get them activated as well. So we ask for that sponsorship and also any support. I'd love to learn from each and one of you all here around the table, or the call, if you will, to understand your thoughts on different communities, what leaders we should be talking to, what corporates, what nonprofits who would be interested in this work. And with that, overall, our vision is to have Grand Rapids lead the efforts. I think also I'm here in Detroit. I will be in the beautiful city of Grand Rapids next week. But we believe that Grand Rapids and your capabilities of managing public-private partnerships is super essential for some of the work that we're trying to do here. We believe that Detroit will soon follow. We're already working in parallel. And a lot of actually, I think you all love to hear this, a lot of stakeholders here are actually looking to Grand Rapids in some regard in terms of smart cities and innovation around that. Overall, our vision is to map all of Michigan from Flint, Troy, Lansing, obviously the two major cities on the coast, to ultimately have Michigan lead the Midwest in terms of being a place where environmental equity is on the forefront. So with that, again, I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to present to you all, very fortunate to have an experienced management team from Jim Meeks and the Rapids Ventures team and their support and the capabilities to build out this technology and develop a solution that helps us unwind one systemic issue around the air that we breathe. And ultimately, I'm just super excited that the work that we are doing here today can benefit those who are born tomorrow. So with that, thank you. I would love to, if we have time for feedback, or I'll pass that on to you, Tim. But thank you for the time.
Thanks, Darren. This is Rick. I have a couple questions. I'll start it out. Where would the sensors in the DDA boundaries go, Tim? Have you mapped it out yet, Darren, or no?
Yeah, we have some ideas, but I think it's definitely critical that we work with the next phase of the proposal is to talk to the stakeholders of the DGRI zone and understand what are the places of emphasis or the places of concern, if you will. So we do have some ideas and we do have a map of that, but I think we definitely can bring that to the table. But also we would love to use the opportunity to ask for feedback on where we want to place them strategically.
I guess the reason I ask is because the DDA boundaries are not that, they're not that spread out. So to have 5 sensors, are we restricted, Tim, to keep, sponsor those within our boundaries, or?
So yes, we would be. I think, as Darren alluded to, the hope is that we could demonstrate our interest in doing this, and that there would be additional organizations elsewhere in the city that would want to follow. But yeah, we'd be restricted to sponsoring those within the DDA.
So the other question is, what's a typical call to action, Darren? Let's say, you have a hotspot, or what are some typical mitigating actions that can be taken? I'm just curious, once you know that the air quality is not good in a particular spot, how do you go about reducing that?
Absolutely. Well, we've seen a lot of cities and a lot of cities in Europe actually kind of lead the way in these efforts. there's a multitude of different solutions that can come out of this. So one could be, now that you have this data and access and more accuracy, you can understand where that, what time of day, and also where exactly that location is. Maybe it's a hot traffic spot, therefore, maybe reducing traffic or having other traffic strategies to kind of spread that density within the city environment. Others is maybe urban planning or green development. So where are we going to plan to put this park or plant these trees and really have some green infrastructure? Now you have an opportunity in a landscape where, oh, we understand this is a hot spot right here, so let's actually work here rather than making those decisions without having that data. So those are little examples, but we believe that with having the data, you can have a more targeted approach of deploying different strategies.
Okay. Greg, did I see you at your hand up, or?
I did, but I think the question was answered. In looking at the enclosed handout, my question on the appendix was the first map had two areas highlighted. One was the downtown GR, which looked to resemble the DDA boundaries, and then there was Roosevelt Park. But I think I heard Tim say that the DDA would be asked to fund only the program within its borders, and that was my question.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, give more context to that. So yeah, in the appendix, the first map, the DGRI, that's where we're saying to sponsor the 5 sensors. Overall, we want to put 5 sensors in Roosevelt Park and other communities of interest, probably in Ward 3, and understanding different neighborhoods in that area. So yeah, this first proposal, we put the appendix there just to show other places that of interest, but the main one is that first one, appendix A.
Hey, Molly, I see you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. For those who don't know me, I'm Molly Claire, and I'm the CFO for the city of Grand Rapids. I'm here in place of Jana Wallace, who used to attend your meetings. I just wanted to point out the city has a air quality program that was funded with grants from the state up till a couple years ago. So I just wanted to point out that we talk about a larger geographical area. The city might have unused resources right now. And I don't know if that can be leveraged as well, but I just thought I would mention that. I can certainly get you more information.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. I was not aware. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Molly.
Hey, this is Jermel. And thanks, Molly, too, for sharing that, because although I'm on the DDA, have a business downtown, my immediate thought was of a resident in 49507 with so much going on over there and some inequities over there. And so I appreciate knowing that there is potentially something in place that can spread this around a little bit more.
And Tim, remind everybody what our ask would be for this.
So we didn't intend to make an ask today. I think as Darren's proposal outlined, funding 5 sensors in downtown would be approximately $30,000. And so we had hoped to get some feedback from you all today and then bring it back at a later point. Obviously, if you wanted to move today, that's also an option. But we wanted to give you a chance to kind of sit with it, give it some thought. We also want to just introduce the idea a little more broadly to the community so that we can start to identify some of those partners. But yeah, we're just hoping to get a little feedback from the board.
Any other questions or comments?
Talon here. Sorry, I don't have a hand on my toolbar. I think it's because I don't have a Microsoft account, so I'm listed as a guest. Anyway, little background for Darren. I'm a Kent County Commissioner, and one of our responsibilities at the county is public health. I also represent in my district the Granville Avenue corridor, the Roosevelt Park neighborhood, and over the past couple of years, I've heard a lot of concern expressed both from the business association and from the neighborhood association about the significant socioeconomic issues in that neighborhood. And so I really appreciate getting some more granular data about what's happening along that corridor. 2 things occur to me. Well, first of all, I want to make sure you know about connecting with both of those organizations, because I think that would be very valuable. The second thing is to talk about two factors. I think one is that corridor, is 1,000 feet from US 131, and so that's a potentially a significant factor for much of the corridor. The other is one of the other things that the county does is solid waste disposal, and near the DDA district boundaries is the waste to energy facility, our trash burning incinerator for the 6 cities that include Grand Rapids. The data, the EPA regulations for incinerators are more than met, according to the reports from the company that we contract with to manage it. But I think it'd be good to have additional data to verify that facility is not affecting air quality in the neighborhood. I'm not sure how we do that, but people like you that are much smarter than me about it can certainly figure that out. So the opportunity, recognizing that the DDA boundary only touches the edge of that corridor and that Black Hills district, I think if there's a possibility of getting data on those two influencers, that would be really helpful.
Thank you, Jim. That's really helpful. I appreciate it. And you said the two organizations was the neighborhood and the business association for Roosevelt Park.
It's
Correct.
called the Granville Avenue Business Association and the Roosevelt Park Neighborhood Association.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
So Darren, if we approve this eventually, are you going to open an office in Grand Rapids then, or what?
We're already there. So yeah, we're working out of right by, I actually forgot the center. Jim, what's
I should expand your office.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm coming up there almost every 2 weeks. So we have an office out there with the Rapids Ventures team, and yeah, look forward to really working out of Grand Rapids and making this happen there.
So I guess if with the board's pleasure, if we'd like to sit on this for a month, or if we'd like to act more quickly, that would be up to the board. And we can certainly bring it back next meeting, and let us sit on it for a little bit, or we could entertain a motion today.
Mr. Chair, this is Greg. I would be open to entertaining a motion that would go ahead and move this for approval contingent upon it being the requirements being met for the citywide rollout, or for the full program being met. But if that sort of clarity or commitment helps and can be leveraged to get other partners around the city to participate, I think there's probably some value in this board moving early. But if that doesn't add value, then waiting to see the final package makes sense as well.
So am I taking that as your motion, or?
Sure, if that could be understood.
Okay, this is KM. I would support that motion as presented. And just to add one comment is that I think the idea of having this more granular data makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the project, it seems like we also should have some really clear action steps in terms of mitigation. I think we're going to find that air quality could stand to be improved. And I want to know what we should do about it.
Yeah, I think that's the question I was trying to get at is, it's great to have more data. If it's difficult to correct the problem, then, then what happens? But you have to know the data first to be able to react to a problem. So, so we do have a motion and a second. Is there anyone on the board that would like to vote nay on this motion? Hearing none, motion carries. So thanks, Darren. Good luck in getting a wider, broader support for this, and we'll help you as much as we can.
Absolutely. I really appreciate y'all. Thank you so much, and look forward to connecting with each one of you all.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, we'll be sure to update the board at the meeting next month on progress. So thank you all.
Okay, next is social zone update. Mark, are you taking this forward?
Yes, I am. You hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. So Amanda, if you can advance the slides as I need them. I hope many of you are aware of what we've been up to the last 3 weeks. So these things were deployed on like Friday, I think it was Friday the 19th. So we're about the 3rd week in. They were really created under the policy that was moved forward by the city of Grand Rapids. And then we've worked extensively with the city of Grand Rapids to sort of facilitate these and get them deployed. It's important to note that because we're in such a short period of time, we are constantly monitoring them, making adjustments to them, having conversations with the business owners that are impacted by them. And just as an example of that, yesterday we made a pretty substantial modification to one of them by moving about 17 concrete barriers from Monroe North down to Monroe Center to partially close that mid-block area between Ionia and Ottawa to accommodate some traffic movement, which was something that some of the business owners have requested. But still, in addition, keeping some seating on that side of the street, which is important to like places like Little Bird and the hotel that's there. So that's just a great example of sort of the response that we're doing and the city is doing to make modifications to these zones. And I think that that's going to continue as we move forward with these and see how they begin to work. So I'm not going to get into the detail of them a whole lot unless there are questions from you all. But really what we're talking about is 4 social zone districts. And so there's one up in Monroe North. That's the outline in the green. And then there's the Bridge Street one, which is blue. The Center City one is orange. So that's pretty much the largest one and focuses on the core downtown. And then there's the Hartside social zone. So if you think about these things, they're just these boundaries of areas. And then within each one of those boundaries, we begin to do what we call interventions. So we do installations, deployments of various things to accommodate the ability of businesses to expand into the public realm. In the beginning, primarily to facilitate more outdoor seating for both bars and restaurants, because they obviously have constraints on both their occupancy and their social distancing protocols inside. So sometimes we're seeing maybe a 70% reduction of their capacity inside. This allows them to get a little bit more expansion and take advantage of the better weather than we would be typically having in the winter. So that's sort of where we are with them and why they exist. I think that this document here really helps to sort of show what we're talking about. There's about 133 bars and restaurants in these 4 zones, and there's about 44 retail and service establishments within these zones. So we're hopeful that as we continue on, that many of these businesses will be able to take part in these things, begin to use them, and really hopefully support them financially moving forward as we navigate this recovery process. So next slide, please. So really the rest of this is going to be photos of what's been happening. And I would be remiss if I didn't start by simply letting you all know that our ambassador team and a few of our staff members have really been working behind the scenes a lot of time on putting this stuff together. So you can see that in these photos. We bought, the DGRI purchased about 200 tables, about 700 chairs a few months ago in anticipation of these. So we had obviously had to put all of those together. So you can see the ambassadors putting those together. You can see in the lower left, putting up some of our umbrellas that we had previously used at other locations. So that's the ambassador team, and also Yeo from our office. He has been involved in all of this right from the start. So there's been a lot of collaboration with a lot of people behind the scenes. And then that upper right photo shows them deploying the tables. And then as we've continued to monitor and maintain these places, we're also obviously cleaning them. So the lower picture shows one of our ambassadors going around and sanitizing the tables and chairs, which is an ongoing effort. And then also just the deployment of the tables is an ongoing effort. So we're constantly watching how these things are working and then adjusting the tables accordingly, depending upon where there may be needs and where there's less activity. So that's something that we are monitoring as we move forward. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through them briefly and give you sort of a flavor of what's going on in the various locations. This one is in the Monroe North zone, and it is right outside of Little Bird. And so what we did here was we essentially dropped in some concrete barriers and took over the parking area in front of that building that runs basically the whole length of the building from City Built all the way down to Field and Fire. This location is obviously Field and Fire, and it really allows for Field and Fire to encroach into that space and expand their seating. They've various times that a few of us have been up there, we've noticed that it's pretty heavily used, and particularly in the morning, as you might expect, because of that business's sort of use with breakfast food and coffee. And then down the street from it is City Built, where obviously that's a different time of day use, but they're also pretty heavily using theirs in combination with their parklet. So this has been, I think, a pretty good success story and something that continually evolves. Up in Monroe North, we've also taken over parts of the parking lots in the park areas. So right across the street, you'll note that one of the parking lots is closed, and that's going to be sort of an evolving situation for mostly City Built, where they intend to install some games, some umbrellas, and some tables where you can do some off-site eating and drinking potentially there. So that's one of our deployments in Monroe North. Next slide, please. And then we move into the city center in Monroe Center, and I've got a couple of different photos showing, or a couple different slides showing the various installations there. What we've done is basically take over 3 blocks from Monroe and Pearl all the way to Division. And as I said, the middle block was modified yesterday. The first block between Ottawa and Monroe is still fully closed, so by the Art Museum. And then the other 2 blocks are partially half closed and still allow access on the street. These are getting used in various ways. Some of the businesses are using them for exclusive use, where they've actually modified their liquor permits with the MLCC in the city of Grand Rapids to provide service in them, whereas other ones are more general seating, where anybody can sort of go out and get food from one of these businesses and hang out. So in these cases, we've obviously deployed the tables and chairs. We've also deployed some of the umbrellas. These red umbrellas were actually purchased by Ucellos and deployed into our tables. So that's something that we are encouraging, where people begin to take some of these spaces and help to make them their own and then embellish them a little bit in helping us with some of the deployment of the resources to make them a little bit more inviting. Next slide. Another round of slides from Monroe Center. Again, these are the white umbrellas up there in the corner are ours, and then the red ones are Ucellos. And you can begin to see how this is sort of working out. The tables are flexible, so in the one picture, obviously people move them together to have a larger group, which is allowed. I mean, people are moving the tables, which is nice. I was down there yesterday and we saw some people from Little Bird moving a table into the shade. So it's great that the tables are flexible and we can sort of move them around. And then I think drawing your attention to the lower right-hand corner, which is the third block of Monroe Center, and that shows it half closed so cars can still drive down that. And what you see in the foreground is that pipe rail that's being installed from House of Wine. And he is one of the folks who has expanded his alcohol permit to provide service out there, and he's delineating it with these barriers. So that's an ongoing process for him. He's been sort of building this as he goes incrementally. And I think that that's the beauty of these things, is that we are in some ways experimenting and seeing how this works for the businesses. And then we are making adjustments and they are making adjustments. We're working with them. The city has been a great partner. In particular, Lou Canfield and Jonathan Bartlett have really worked hand in hand with us to get this stuff deployed and figure some of these nuances out for this business recovery, always under the premise that this is here to support businesses primarily, and seeing what they need to make this work for them and getting input from them, obviously, about what we can do to improve it or potentially change it to help them along the way. Next slide. This is Sheldon Avenue. This is part of the city center social zone, and it's right in front of Apartment Lounge and the Children's Museum. And these photos were taken last weekend. And I only put them in here because I think it's a great story about how we're moving this thing along. So we had originally closed Sheldon Street in the original deployment, and then we got a lot of feedback from some of the surrounding businesses who were concerned about that. So we changed that, we removed that, and then when the governor's order came down last week about the closing of bars, we sort of had a lot of panicked bar owners on our hands. One of them was the Apartment Lounge. And so we were able to, within 24 hours, put this temporary barricade up to carve out some space with the Apartment Lounge. And we were deploying this on Friday. We sort of had approvals from the city previously, and then we worked with the city most of the day on Thursday to get these resources deployed. And so our ambassadors came on Friday morning and put this stuff out in collaboration with the bar owner. He was out there Friday morning helping us deploy this stuff, and then he got the umbrellas, added some of his tables and chairs, and is in the process of adding some landscaping. So this is really sort of a great story about the evolution of it, but I think also the showing how urgent it is in some cases, and how the city and DGRI and ambassador staff have really stepped up and tried to be responsive and proactive in this process to get these things moved along as quick as possible. Because I think that what we find is that the business owners are really, many of them are at their wits' end with not being able to open or being closed and not having income. And so anything that we can do, I think, to help them along the way is really helpful for them and appreciated by them. So that it's been a very good process so far. Not without its hiccups and bumps, but I think we're working through those. And then in Hartside, we've closed Ionia. If you've been down there, we've closed half the street in the first block on the west side, and then the second block on the east side to take advantage of the adjacent businesses there. So this is just showing that sort of change in the street and how it's being used with some of the table deployment. And the next slide, please. I don't know if there's another one from Ionia or not. What we're seeing, okay, so this is Bridge. So I just wanted to say that Ionia is an evolving situation. So we have Max's and Luna both like really sort of beginning the embellishment process. You'll see that Max's actually has some AstroTurf out now. They're putting some landscaping out. I think he's got some umbrellas out now. So it's an evolving thing for those guys as well. And then Bridge Street, I'm going to end with Bridge Street because I think that this is probably one of the best examples thus far of the way that the business community has sort of taken this space that the city and DGRI has made available and really begun to make it their own in terms of how they've embellished it and created that sort of sense of place where it's a very nice place to go. It's an interesting place to go and sit outside and enjoy a meal. So this is the area in front of O'Toole's and Butchers Union. And the Butchers Union and O'Toole's really came out and added a whole bunch of landscaping to this area, added their own seating to combine with our seating and tables. and then put in the umbrellas. And it's if you look at these images, or if you go out there prior to them being to closing after one of their positive test cases, it was really sort of very vibrant and robust. And then the next slide, which is the last slide, I think that these images really begin to show what was going on there that one weekend when they were open. And I think they're really, the landscaping, the umbrellas, the lighting that they installed really began to make these spaces sort of people-centered places. And it showed in how the people came out to use them. So I think that's the end of my slides, and I'm happy to have any questions or comments about this as we move forward.
I think my only thoughts on this are, we started this parklet program a while ago, Tim, and, I feel like this, I'm hoping that this actually survives the whole COVID issue and becomes more permanent installations each summer as we move forward. Because I really think, this could be a sort of a game changer for the businesses in all these locations, and for the city to really, have all this outdoor. I mean, all these photos to me look like Europe, and where you see so much more outdoor seating, and really the parklets really didn't. We had a few, but I think our hope was that they would take off. Be more robust of a program. So anyway, I think it's great.
We agree 100%. I think, we're interested to see how these things perform, and working with the city to understand what elements of this could remain either seasonally or even permanently. So I think that's part of our long-term vision and evaluation.
Jessica, did I see you had a question?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to add in response to that comment about wanting this to remain. So there's brand new social district legislation that was just signed by the governor that Andy and others at DGRI and Mark worked on. And that will make these types of changes permanent. It's a little bit different, but it's the same idea where the city will be able to create social districts and within them commons areas where liquor can be served or can be consumed. So just so you know, there's a state legislation piece that's coming soon that will make these permanent.
Well, liquor service and consumption will make them more robust, no doubt.
This is Jim T.
Yes.
I'm wondering if someone could perhaps shed a little light on experience that I had a couple of weeks ago. I was riding my bike through, it was the first block of Ionia south of Fulton, and it was admittedly a hot sunny day, probably midday, I think on a weekend, but there weren't very many people out in the area. And then when I got down to the corner where Hopcat is, I overheard a conversation between the person that was letting people inside and the guests, in which the guests asked about that area outside with the tables, and the person from Hopcat said, well, that's not really our area and we can't serve you out there. I was a little confused by that. I wasn't sure whether the Hopcat staff was confused, but if someone could perhaps shed a little more light about the specifics there of whether that's changed in the last couple of weeks, or are they able, is a place like Hopcat able to serve out there in that social zone on Ionia?
Well, up to this point, it's my understanding, no, unless they went to the MLCC, as we did, to expand our space outside Ruth's Chris. But we just got approval, so it does take some time. Now, I don't know if the governor's new legislation will make this a lot easier. That would be great.
So does Uccello's have that permission? What are they doing that they're serving, or are they not actually serving customers out there on Monroe Center?
It's probably important to distinguish here about between what you're asking about, what they're serving. So is it food or alcohol? And if it's alcohol, then it's just a different layer of approval that's required, and that's kind of what Jessica was just mentioning. There are areas where businesses, as in years past, where you can get a license that allows you to serve in the public space, but that's still a license that's required from the MLCC. To actually serve alcohol into the social zone outside of the permit, you have to go through this new process that has just been established. So there's a little bit of nuance in the answer.
So Hopcat could serve food out there. They could send servers out and take orders and deliver food out there if they wanted to. Is that what I understand?
Yes, Jim. So any of the social zones that exist today can be serviced with food. There's no restrictions on that at this point in time. I think that what you're going to find is if you go out and want to get service for food and alcohol, there's only a few that have been able to navigate the process, which I understand isn't that difficult at this point, but you have to be, I think, a little bit proactive with it. So the Reinerts over at on the west side at Butchers Union, they had everything, their alcohol and service, so their permit for alcohol service was in place right when they opened. So they were servicing out in these photos that you see here. In addition to that, Luna has gotten their permit. The wine bar on Monroe has their permit. So there's a few that have been able to create what we are sort of referring to as exclusive use zones in these social zones, where they've carved out a space in collaboration with the city of Grand Rapids and mostly the Michigan Liquor Control Commission to be able to service alcohol in those places. But other than so it is Hopcat could do it, but it's a process for them to do.
That's really helpful. And I guess one quick follow-up then, do I understand that once you do get that additional permitting, it's perhaps similar to what was standard procedure before, that you just have to demarc your area in some way, that is the area being served by your business, and I assume that's for liability reasons and so on?
Yep, that's true.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Okay, any other questions on this? Otherwise, I'm doing a terrible job of keeping us on time. So if we want to move along to event support, Tim?
Yeah, I wanted to make one other point on the social zones before we move on, was that I think Mark talked about kind of the evolution and some of the amenities that we're hoping to incorporate into those zones going forward. From time to time, there may be some expenditures that need to come up, and outside of a DDA board meeting, I would, I guess, ask for approval or at least acknowledgement that we can take those requests to our Economic Recovery Committee, if that was something that the board was comfortable with.
Well, those are only requests over your limit, which would be over 15.
Yeah, so anything over 15, we would want to be able to move quickly if the board was all right with that.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, this is Jamel. I have one question to add, if that's okay. And that is, I'm wondering the possibility, and I don't know if this would be on the business owners or what, but the possibility of installing the standing hand sanitizer, y'all know what I'm saying, hand sanitizer station. Too much juice, right? In some of these areas, and I'm not sure how costly that would be. I saw one somewhere I was walking. I think it might have been by Hopcat. They had one that looked like it appeared to have a like a chain and lock system as well, where it looked like they were going to maybe chain it up to something. I don't know if they did or not, but I'm just wondering the possibility of that. And again, I'm not sure of the expense, but maybe 2 or 3 of these in each social zone could be helpful.
Yeah, and that is part of the plan. And so we have some sanitizing stations out. Most of those have been developed by the ambassadors and our team, just kind of DIY setup. Again, we're looking to procure those so that they're readily available. But there are, I believe, in each zone there are currently dispensers set up, but we can always add more.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So yeah, Rick, I don't know that we need an official motion on the idea of working through the committee. If there's no opposition, I think we can use that as our approach for anything over 15K.
I would agree. I mean, we just to remind the board, we did agree to that in the previous budget. And the committee we really haven't, we've had one that I recall to approve. So I'm fine with it unless there's another board member that'd like to speak up. Okay, hearing none. Tim, you want to move on to your report?
Actually, we do have one more one action item.
Oh, did I miss something?
Yeah, this is our event support request.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay.
No, that's all right, and I can move through it relatively quickly. But wanted to bring this item forward. So what we're requesting is repurposing of the funds that were previously slated to go to Art Prize toward an event that is under development to happen in September. And so you'll remember that back in May, you all approved 3 years of funding for Art Prize, beginning with the upcoming Art Prize 11 that was scheduled to happen in September. But I think, as everyone knows, on June 10th, the Art Prize board announced that the event was being canceled. And so following that, ourselves, the city, Experience Grand Rapids Chamber, and a few others got together to understand and talk about what might be able to be done instead of Art Prize. Obviously, we're not going to be able to recreate or replace it, but there was broad agreement that holding an event of some sort in downtown would be of value. And it could also importantly be a platform to amplify some of the conversations that have been happening around equity and racial justice. So there's still a lot of details to be worked out. We've been talking about this now for just over 3 weeks, but preliminarily we're looking at the month of September, talking broadly about categories of public art, music, culture, community, all of it being focused, all of it with a local focus, but with a primary footprint of downtown, which is important. And so given the timing, we're also going to be looking at ways to build on existing work, including the social zones that Mark just kind of walked through, but also the plywood murals, the Black Lives Matter murals that have been going up around downtown on the broken windows, the other mural programs that we have going up, so through the Women Ways alley activation. We also have busking program. A number of cultural fests have already expressed interest. Our small business expo is also going to be happening in September. And so there's kind of a lot of this activity that was planned and maybe had to get rethought that we are looking to incorporate into this. And so, but prior to doing anything, I wanted to ask the board and get your approval to use the funds that had been dedicated to Art Prize to go towards this event. What that means and looks like is, as I mentioned, is still to be determined, but primarily I think what our funds would go towards coordination staff, commission potentially for local artists and musicians, and marketing. And then the last thing I just wanted to note is that we all obviously recognize and understand that COVID is still here and hasn't gone away. And so we can also work with the county health department and Dr. London to prioritize health and safety and to continue to work closely with them so that we're monitoring numbers and making sure that anything that's planned is responding and reflecting to where we are with the virus. So that's a quick rundown of some conversations that have been going on. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Tim, the amount again is $50,000.
Yeah, so your approval back in May was for $50,000 for Art Prize this year.
Greg?
This is KM. I would like to move approval enthusiastically and encourage a continued emphasis on arts and culture.
This is Rosalind. I support.
Greg, did you have a question?
I did, and I support the intent. I just, from a form or process perspective, am struggling with approving a grant to something that we don't know what it is, and just curious if we have a past precedent of that, and just how that factors. I can't imagine we wouldn't support it, but it just seems awkward that we would fund something that we don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's a good question. I can't think of a precedent for that. I think we're kind of navigating through an unprecedented time. I think what I can what I can say is that obviously the funds can't be used for anything that's not an eligible activity for the DDA, and that the intent is that it would be used in the same manner as what the art prize, I guess, approval was for, just without the detail, because we're still very early in this and sort of pivoting. We just don't have those specifics to share yet. I fully appreciate your question and point, though.
Any other questions or comments? We do have a motion and support. Tim?
Chair?
Or is that Jim?
Jim, yep.
Yeah.
Tim, sorry to have to ask this question, but can you give us a sense of the makeup of the group? It sounds like an informal group, and just wondering if there are significant representation of people of color amongst the group.
So the group is evolving, is what I would say. I think we have an initial group got together, as I mentioned, that was primarily the city, DGRI, Chamber, Experience Grand Rapids, and there may be a few others that I'm missing. The intent was to kind of build out a framework for this, and then to engage with event producers, musicians, artists, etc., as we move through. So I don't have the specific makeup or demographic breakdown at the moment, but I could share that after the fact, and I think I would also just point out that that is a primary focus for how this thing would be built, is to focus on having representative participation from throughout the community.
And I guess I would just encourage that and recognize the importance of having representation at the very beginning, in addition to once kind of the overall broad concepts are determined. That kind of at all levels, it's pretty important. And I think that's what we're recognizing more and more, and need to keep paying attention to. And especially if this particular event is in response to some of the concerns that have been raised in our community, that's pretty important. So just want to call that to attention. Thanks.
Totally agree. It's a great point.
I think we all agree. So any other comments or questions?
This is Luis. I think I was thinking about Greg's question as well as Tim was presenting, and I think the way that I feel comfortable with this is, despite the sort of undefined nature of this, I think it's important for us to show some support of it and to add resources to this so that they can develop something. I think in essence, it just shows that we are, to KM's point, supportive of the arts, and that we don't want this to just go away because our prize isn't there, but that as a downtown development authority, we're taking this seriously. So I feel comfortable, even though we're not fully, it's not fully defined just yet. So I support it.
Okay. So I have motion and a support. Anyone on the board that would like to vote nay on this motion? All right, hearing none, motion carries. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you all. Appreciate the discussion there.
So my bad, now we can move on to your report.
Yeah, and I'll be brief, recognizing the clock here. Quickly wanted to point out our Portland Loo, so the public restroom in Hartside will be going in, scheduled to be delivered and installed on July 24th. The site work is, I believe, just about complete over at Division and Weston. So keep an eye out for that to be installed here shortly. Also, a number of things happening in the kind of public space activation, a couple that have been talked about, but wanted to highlight, there's a new mural down at the dog park. So if you have not been down there recently, go check that out. Then also the Women's Ways murals, so the alley activation that Kim has talked about previously, those are also starting this week. And so murals at the police department, up in Monroe North, at the Auto Fix-It shop, 20 Monroe, and the Children's Museum are going in. So a lot of vibrancy and artwork will be taking taking place in downtown. Also, the Goal 5 group is starting to think about already winter activation planning. And so you'll recall last year we had our Krios installation with the prisms and pyramids up at the 555 Monroe Law. So our Goal 5 group is already starting to think about winter activation and hope to be bringing a proposal back to you all soon. Lastly, related to Goal 1 and the river activation. So we were, and hopefully you all saw this, but we were accepted into the Highline Network group for the Grand River Revitalization Project. So we were one of 15 new members added to that group this year. You may recall some of the work and some of the speakers that we had earlier this year around river governance. I think having that network really helped us in that regard. But we'll also continue to lean a little bit more in on that network as we move into the equity framework for action for the river corridor that we'll be moving into this fiscal year. So we'll be connected with colleagues in Washington, D.C. and Atlanta on that. So a bit of good news related to the river and some of our continuing work. And I just wanted to highlight that. I believe that's all I wanted to touch on, but happy to take any questions if there are from the board.
Any questions for Tim? Okay, if not, I'll move on. Now is the time for public comment. If there is anybody on this Zoom meeting, or I guess it's Microsoft Teams, sorry, that would like to comment, now is the time. All right, hearing none. Board member discussion. I do have an item I'd like to bring up. There was maybe a comment, a better way to put it, that or a question as to if there was any interest in the board at some time in the future getting back together. I know there's interest, but in actual meeting together in face to face. Tim, I know you were working on some IT software that could allow us to Zoom additional people into a live meeting. And there's certainly meeting space here at the Amway, which could accommodate and allow us to abide by the 6-foot rule and still have a meeting in person. So I guess I was trying to get the temperature of the board to see what kind of interest there is in that moving forward. Or we can just keep this meeting going as a virtual meeting until we're more comfortable. Any comments on that?
Diana, as much as I would like to have an in-person meeting, and I truly would, because I am, as all of you know, a very social person and I like the face-to-face contact, I will tell you I'm still very uncomfortable with doing that. And while the rhetoric is strong out in the community as well, the nation, coronavirus is on the rise, and I am not willing to risk myself being in a in-person meeting. So that's just my one opinion.
And I think it could be a little too soon, but I just wanted to get it out there, as an option. So Tim, I don't know where you are on the software, and we can, we can bring this back up in another month.
Yeah, we have ordered some technology. We'll obviously need to test it out. We'll have to check on the delivery date, but yeah, that we've ordered a tool that would allow us to kind of have a hybrid virtual in-person meeting.
Yeah.
So Rick, I can stay in touch with you on that. We can just.
Okay.
But make no mistake, I really would love to meet in person. I really would, but
yeah.
I think I have mixed feelings. I'm with you on really wanting to get together in person. I think the meetings are much more dynamic that way. However, it's as Tim said, we're navigating through unprecedented times. So we get it, but leave it on as a discussion item. I think we should moving forward, just so if we're more comfortable, we can do that. And again, as long as, we're not using the meeting space here at the hotel, it's available, it's been sanitized, it's been, so we could do that at some point in the future.
This is KM. I just want to echo my support for Diana's position. I think we need to continue to be smart in this community and maintain a distance from one another, although I certainly miss the social aspect of it as well. So.
Okay. Any other comments?
This is Luis. I support that as well.
Mr. Chairman, I would throw a little bit of a contrarian opinion, and I appreciate the honesty of those that have voiced their discomfort. And I think that should be always accommodated during this period. But I would pose for the board a concern that, to the extent that anybody pays attention to the DDA, that if we are supposed to reflect leadership and that downtown is open for business, as it were, and for the local downtown establishments, that leading by example is generally a preferred mode of behavior. And I think that we ought to take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, don't disagree. I think it would be appropriate once, Tim, you have the software so that we know those that remain uncomfortable could still zoom into the meeting and be an active participant. I think that should be a qualification of moving to any meeting space.
This is Talon. I guess I appreciate that somewhat alternative perspective. I'd also like to suggest that my view is that things that are not essential to do in person probably shouldn't be done in person, except under extreme circumstances. And so, setting the example for downtown, I'm not sure we're the type of business that generally we're trying to promote retail and restaurants and so on. You really can't do those remotely very well. So it doesn't feel like it's necessary, other than perhaps to set an example, but I think we are a very different type of business. So it still makes sense to me to, as long as we're allowed to, under the governor's order, to continue to meet this way. Just my thoughts. Thanks.
Well, I appreciate the discussion. Any other comments? If not, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks so much, everyone. Stay healthy, stay safe.